Welcome back. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to Retail Horror Stories. Hit the like button and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That way, YouTube knows to keep showing you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. The last customer left just after 9:55 p.m., pushing a squeaky cart of plywood through the automatic glass doors. The closing announcement echoed over the speakers. Attention Home Depot shoppers, the time is now 10 o'clock. Our store is closing. Please bring all final purchases to the register. Emma, a 20-year-old college sophomore, exhaled as the doors slid shut. She had worked here for nearly a year, long enough to know the quirks of the building after hours. Some employees said the store felt safe at night, quiet, predictable. But Emma disagreed. The silence was never empty. It pressed against her ears, buzzing faintly, like the whole building was holding its breath. Her list tonight was short: straighten in the paint aisle, sweep the main walkways, lock up, and clock out. She tied her orange apron tighter, rolled her shoulders, and grabbed the broom. No manager lingered to supervise. No co-workers hung around to talk. It was just her, 105,000 square feet of hardware, and the fluorescent lights humming like insects. She had grown used to the vastness, the way aisles stretched like tunnels, the way forklifts loomed like sleeping animals in the shadows. But she never stopped glancing over her shoulder. Customers joked that Home Depot was a maze, but at night it really was. Endless corridors of wood, metal, and paint stacked high enough to block her view of anything beyond. Emma started near the front, sweeping slowly, her sneakers squeaking against the tile. The smell of lumber and fertilizer clung to the air, mixed with faint motor oil from the tool rental counter. Somewhere above, an air vent rattled. She muttered a song under her breath to break the stillness. That was when she heard it. A soft crackle overhead. The intercom. She stopped. The broom handle pressed against her palm as she tilted her head toward the square speaker bolted high on the wall. Emma. Her name, whispered through static. The hairs on her arms lifted. She laughed nervously. "Very funny," she said aloud, assuming Alex from electrical had stayed late to mess with her. He loved pranks, jumping out from behind aisles, leaving fake spiders on shelves. Emma dialed the service desk extension on the store phone. No answer. She tried the break room. Still nothing. Her mouth went dry. The crackle returned, louder this time. "Emma, aisle 12. Her stomach sank. Aisle 12 was the paint aisle, exactly where she was headed. She forced a smirk. "Manager's testing me." That's all. She wheeled the broom forward, but her chest felt tight, like the store itself was closing in. Aisle 12 stretched long, walls stacked with cans of paint, neat rows labeled eggshell, bone white, twilight blue. The lights overhead flickered, buzzing harder as if straining to stay alive. The shadows between shelves seemed deeper tonight, as though something waited just beyond. She swept quickly, eyes flicking from one end of the aisle to the other. Her footsteps echoed against the concrete, out of sync with her heartbeat. The intercom crackled again. "Emma, aisle 17. She stopped dead. That was the next aisle over. Her pulse kicked faster. "Screw this," she whispered, abandoning the broom. The voice followed. "Emma, hardware. Emma, garden center. Emma, lumber." Every aisle, every department. The voice chased her through the ceiling, distorted, breathy, like someone pressing their lips against the mic. Her hands shook as she grabbed the cordless phone at the service desk. She punched in 911. The line clicked, but instead of a dial tone came silence, then static. The intercom hissed loud enough to make her flinch. This time, the voice wasn't strange. It was her own voice. "Emma, don't leave the store." The phone clattered from her grip. Her breathing turned ragged. "Nope," she whispered. She sprinted toward the front entrance, sneakers squealing across tile. The sliding doors loomed ahead, parking lot lights glowing beyond. Freedom. But when she reached them, they stayed shut. She waved at the sensor. Nothing. She shoved, yanked, nothing. Her reflection stared back, pale, wide-eyed, hair plastered with sweat. The intercom shrieked. Every speaker in the building roared alive at once. "Don't leave, Emma. You have to stay." Her knees weakened. She staggered back. The lights blinked off. Darkness swallowed the store. Only the red emergency bulbs glowed faintly, casting halos across aisles that seemed to stretch on forever. Somewhere in the dark, something scraped. Metal against tile. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice cracking. No answer. Only her voice again, softer, echoing from every corner. "This is where you belong." Her throat tightened. She stumbled blindly back into aisle 12. Her hand brushed cold metal shelving. She grabbed the first thing she found, a box cutter. She flicked the blade open, her hands trembling so hard the metal rattled. The intercom whispered again, "You can't fight yourself." Down the aisle, movement. She froze. A figure stood at the far end. It was her. Same ponytail, same apron, same sneakers, but older, wrinkled, eyes hollow and black. The figure raised a hand and beckoned. The box cutter slipped from her grip, clattering against the floor. "Why are you doing this?" she screamed. The other Emma's voice filled every speaker at once. "Because I never left." The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Morning arrived. At 6 a.m., the doors unlocked. The store looked pristine. Floors swept, shelves straightened, aisles immaculate. The only thing missing was Emma. Her car sat in the lot. Her phone lay drained on the service desk. The manager checked the security footage. On the screen, Emma worked through the night, sweeping, cleaning, straightening shelves, hour after hour. But she wasn't alone. At her side in every frame was another Emma, older, grayer, moving in perfect sync. And sometimes both glanced directly at the camera, smiling into the lens. The morning staff never saw Emma again, but when they walked past aisle 12, the intercom sometimes hissed. A whisper bled through the static, so faint they weren't sure they heard it right. It always said the same thing. "Emma, aisle 12. The contractor thought nothing of it when he loaded the lumber into his truck. It was a late Thursday evening at Home Depot, and the aisles of building supplies were still busy with workers preparing for weekend jobs. The boards looked like any other, straight, smooth, the smell of pine thick in the air. He strapped them down, signed his receipt, and drove home with plans to start building a deck first thing in the morning. By dawn, the sky was pale gray, and his garage smelled of sawdust and motor oil. He set the first board onto his sawhorse, measuring carefully before cutting. As the circular saw whirred to life, its blade shrieked through the wood. That was when it happened. A thick red liquid splattered across his gloves. At first, he thought it was rust from the saw or oil from the motor. But when he looked closer, his stomach twisted. It wasn't rust, it wasn't oil, it was blood. Dark, sticky, pulsing slowly from the fresh cut, as though the board itself was alive. The contractor dropped the saw, stumbling back. His gloves dripped. His boots left wet prints across the concrete. The board on the sawhorse oozed steadily, a crimson pool spreading beneath it. He pressed a rag against it, but the liquid seeped faster, warm to the touch, soaking the cloth in seconds. "What the hell?" he whispered. He backed away, chest heaving. The other boards in the stack seemed normal, dry, and pale, but when he leaned close, he swore he heard faint groans deep inside the wood, a soft creaking, like old bones under strain. By noon, panic got the best of him. He loaded the lumber back into his truck, hands trembling, heart pounding. He didn't even care about the stares he got as he dragged the dripping boards through the parking lot and back into the store. The smell was unbearable, copper and rot. A wet trail followed him across the polished tile straight to the lumber section. But no one else reacted. Employees in orange aprons passed by with carts, restocking shelves. Customers studied nails and screws, stepping carefully over the rid streaks without so much as a glance. The contractor shouted, "Do you see this?" His voice cracked, desperate. He lifted one of the boards, its edge still weeping dark red liquid, and thrust it toward a worker. The man only smiled lightly and said, "Can I help you find another size?" The contractor froze. He turned in circles, looking at every face. No one saw the blood. To them, the boards were perfectly dry, perfectly normal, but his hands, his clothes, even his truck outside, drenched in crimson that no one acknowledged. He dumped the stack back where it came from, shaking, and staggered toward the exit. That was when he noticed something worse. The entire lumber aisle was different. Rows of fresh-cut boards lined the racks, but each one dripped slowly, steady trails pooling on the floor. The contractor gagged as the coppery stench grew overpowering, filling his lungs. He watched a worker calmly stack new planks, his apron smeared with stains that looked exactly like dried blood. The man smiled, wiping his hands across the fabric as though it were nothing but sawdust. The contractor backed away, eyes burning. His boots slipped in the liquid. He fell, hands slapping against the wet floor. The blood clung to his skin, soaking through his sleeves. He scrambled to his feet, heart hammering, and ran. Out the automatic doors, across the lot, into his truck. He slammed the door shut, gasping, chest heaving. He peeled off his gloves and tossed them aside. But his palms were clean, his sleeves were spotless. The truck seat beneath him held no stain, no smell. He stared in disbelief, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. Had he lost his mind? Was it some kind of hallucination? He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Finally, he started the engine and sped away, refusing to look back. But that night, as he tried to sleep, he heard it, a faint dripping in the garage. He crept downstairs, barefoot, heart pounding. The garage door creaked as he opened it. And there, stacked neatly where he had left them, were the boards he thought he'd returned. Each one seeped steadily onto the concrete, dark red puddles spreading wider, inch by inch. The boards pulsed faintly, as though veins ran deep inside the wood. And when he pressed his ear close just for a moment, he swore he heard whispers, voices, low, muffled, and countless. Not words exactly, but groans and cries, layered, overlapping, as though trapped inside the grain itself. The boards seemed to breathe. The contractor stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. He wanted to burn them, but when he grabbed his lighter fluid and matches, something stopped him. A whisper hissed louder than the rest. "Don't!" He froze, trembling, lighter fluid dripping down his arm. The wood surface rippled, veins darkening, the faint thump of a heartbeat rising beneath it. The pile quivered as though something inside was trying to get out. The contractor dropped the canister, stumbling for the door. He slammed it shut, locked it, and pressed his back against it, heart racing. Through the door, he heard the boards shifting, scraping, dragging, moving closer. By morning, the garage floor was dry again. The boards looked ordinary, stacked neatly, no sign of liquid or veins. But the whispers never stopped. Days turned into weeks, and neighbors began complaining about the smell. Something coppery and foul seeped through the walls of his house, clinging to the air. When the police finally came with a warrant, they found the garage empty, no boards, no stains, no sign of the contractor at all. But employees at the Home Depot swear he still visits. Late at night, a man in blood-soaked work boots drags dripping lumber across the tile, his eyes wide, his mouth trembling with words no one understands. He doesn't shop. He doesn't speak. He just places the boards back on the racks, one by one, before vanishing into the aisles. And when the morning crew arrives, they always find the same thing: fresh stacks of lumber, and faint red stains on the floor that no mop can scrub away. Most people thought of Home Depot's garden center as harmless: rows of flowers, racks of fertilizer, and the faint scent of mulch lingering in the air. But for Kevin, a high schooler who had just started working nights, it was the most unsettling part of the store. During the day, sunlight poured through the glass roof, filling the place with warmth and color. At night, when the rest of the building locked down, the garden center felt more like a greenhouse for shadows. It was his third week on the job, and he'd been given the closing duty of watering the plants. His manager had tossed him the keys, said goodnight, and left him alone in the sprawling building. Kevin didn't mind. The pay was good enough. Still, every time he wheeled the hose through the automatic sliding doors into the garden center, he felt the same unease crawl up his spine. The glass roof reflected the light strangely, doubling the aisles into endless mirrors of greenery. The racks stretched so tall they blocked his view of anything past the first few rows. That night, the fog outside pressed heavy against the glass panes, glowing faintly under the orange parking lot lamps. Kevin pulled the hose toward the far corner, water splashing rhythmically across rows of potted ivy. The plants rustled softly in the misty air, but then he noticed something odd. The vines seemed longer than usual. They draped lower, coiling across the floor in lazy spirals. He blinked hard, thinking he was imagining it. But when he turned back after watering another row, the vines had crept further, reaching almost to his boots. Kevin stepped back quickly, yanking the hose with him. What the hell? He wasn't the type to scare easy, but the plants didn't look right. The leaves were darker, their edges jagged, the shine on them too slick, like wet skin instead of greenery. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound died in his throat when he heard it, faint whispering. At first, he thought it was the hiss of the hose. But no, it was voices, layered and soft, rising from the ivy. The words weren't clear, but the rhythm was unmistakable, like chanting. Kevin dropped the hose. Water splattered across the concrete, pooling quickly. He turned to leave, but the automatic doors at the end of the center didn't open. He waved at the sensor. Nothing. He pushed against the glass. Locked. His chest tightened. He hurried back toward the store entrance, but as he passed the tall racks, he froze. The trees had grown taller. He swore they'd only reached 8 feet that morning, but now their branches scraped the glass ceiling, roots bulging from their pots, cracking the concrete. The sound was unbearable. Wood stretching, roots splitting tile. Kevin stumbled backward, tripping over a bag of mulch. When he hit the ground, he realized the floor wasn't just wet from the hose. It was damp everywhere. The air heavy with moisture. The smell earthy and raw, like freshly dug graves. The chanting grew louder. Whispers turned into groans, leaves shivering with every syllable. The ivy slithered across the floor, curling around the fallen hose, dragging it deeper into the shadows. Kevin bolted. He sprinted down the nearest aisle, past racks of soil and fertilizer. But the rows stretched longer than he remembered. No matter how far he ran, the exit stayed distant, receding into fog. The glass panes above trembled as branches scraped harder, louder, the ceiling rattling with each groan. He skidded to a stop, gasping, and whipped around. The racks had closed in behind him. What had been neat rows of flowers and herbs now pressed tight, twisting together, blocking the path. Petals curled like teeth. Stems coiled like ropes. Kevin's breath came ragged. This isn't real. But it was. The vines surged forward, wrapping around his ankles. He kicked frantically, tearing free, but more came. They dragged across his skin like cold fingers, tightening with every second. He stumbled, catching himself on a wooden pallet, only for the wood to splinter under his hand, roots bursting through it like veins. The chanting turned deafening now, low, guttural, almost human. Kevin covered his ears, but the sound vibrated through his bones. Through the fog, he saw movement. A figure stood at the far end of the aisle. Tall, thin, cloaked in shifting leaves. Its face was obscured, but its head tilted toward him slowly, unnaturally. As it stepped forward, vines spread outward with each stride, dragging along the concrete like tendrils. Kevin screamed. He grabbed a gardening spade from the rack beside him and swung wildly, hacking at the vines. The blade sliced through, but instead of sap, a thick black liquid sprayed across his shirt, reeking of rot. The vines recoiled, hissing, but they didn't stop. More burst through cracks in the floor, tangling around his waist, his arms pulling him down. He fought until the spade slipped from his grasp. The vines pinned him flat, crawling over his chest, tightening across his throat. He choked, gasping for air as the figure loomed closer. Its hand, if it was a hand, reached out, long fingers made of twisted roots. They brushed his cheek gently, almost tender. Then they dug in. Kevin's scream was swallowed by the chanting. The vines pulled harder, dragging him into the soil. The concrete cracked open, splitting wide like a mouth. The last thing he saw was the glass ceiling shattering, branches tearing through as the entire garden center seemed to collapse inward. Morning came, and the first shoppers arrived. The garden center looked perfectly normal. The aisles were neat, the plants trimmed, the glass ceiling unbroken. The only strange detail was a single pair of muddy sneakers sitting near the mulch bags. No one claimed them, but employees whispered that if you stayed late in the garden center, you could hear it. Soft chanting, drifting through the vines. And sometimes, if you listened closely, the plants seemed to breathe. Most of the night crew at Home Depot joked that the forklifts were haunted. They rattled when no one was near them, beeped in the dark like phantom alarms. But for Maria, who worked stocking shelves, the forklifts weren't funny. They were terrifying. She'd already seen too much. Maria had worked nights for 6 months, long enough to know the strange rhythms of the building. The store always seemed louder after closing. The fluorescent buzz, the echo of her footsteps against polished tile, the occasional creak of metal shelving settling under the weight of heavy stock. The forklifts were the worst. Even when parked, their hulking shadows stretched across the aisles, their forks angled like claws ready to snatch her up. Other workers teased her for glancing over her shoulder whenever she passed them. "It's just steel and hydraulics," her supervisor laughed. "Don't spook yourself." But Maria couldn't shake it. Something about those machines felt wrong, as though they were more than idle equipment waiting for morning. It started on a Tuesday night. The store was nearly empty, the last customers trickling out while Maria stacked boxes of paint cans onto a pallet. Her shift dragged, her back sore, but she pressed on, humming softly to keep the silence at bay. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement down the wide central aisle. One of the forklifts rolled forward. Its headlights flicked on, beams cutting through the gloom. The engine coughed once, then roared to life. Slowly, the machine steered itself away from its bay, forks lifting to balance a pallet of boxes, but the driver's seat was empty. Maria froze, her throat tight. No one had the keys. The forklifts weren't supposed to move without them. Yet this one maneuvered perfectly, beeping as it reversed, then carrying its load as if guided by invisible hands. She told herself it had to be a malfunction, some electrical glitch. Still, her pulse pounded as she crouched behind a stack of drywall, peeking out. The forklift moved with precision, more precise than any human operator she'd seen. It stacked the boxes neatly, shifted gears, and rolled toward another aisle. Maria squinted. Her stomach dropped. There was someone in the seat after all. A man. Pale, gaunt, wearing a faded orange apron. His face looked wrong, drained of color, eyes like hollow sockets reflecting the harsh light. His grin stretched impossibly wide, splitting cracked lips. And though the machine navigated smoothly, his hands never touched the controls. Maria stumbled back, her elbow clanging against the drywall cart. The metallic crash echoed through the cavernous store. The man's head jerked toward her. His smile widened. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then the forklift's horn blared, deafening in the silence. Maria bolted. She sprinted down the lighting aisle, weaving between hanging fixtures. Behind her, the forklift roared louder. Its tires squealed, rubber burning against concrete. It was too big, too wide for the aisle. Yet somehow the shelves seemed to bend, making space as it barreled forward. She ducked into hardware, her chest heaving. She thought she'd lost it, until she heard the steady beep of a forklift in reverse. Closer, closer. Maria burst through the break room door, slamming it shut. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. No bars, not a single line of service. She pressed herself against the wall, every muscle rigid. The beeping grew louder. The door trembled against its hinges. Then silence. Maria held her breath. She could hear her own pulse thudding in her ears. She waited, counting seconds. Finally, she cracked the door open an inch. The aisle beyond looked empty. No forklift, no pale man. Just shadows stretching long under the buzzing lights. She almost laughed in relief. Maybe stress had driven her mad. Maybe she really was imagining things. But when she turned back toward her cart of paint cans, her heart stopped. The boxes she'd stacked earlier were gone. In their place sat a pallet of cinder blocks arranged with unnatural neatness, and draped across the top was a single orange apron, soaked dark as if dipped in oil. But when she leaned closer, the smell wasn't oil at all. It was coppery, sharp, blood. Her stomach twisted. She backed away slowly, trembling so hard her knees nearly buckled. The intercom crackled to life overhead. Maria! Her name, drawn out in a rasping whisper. She dropped her phone, the screen shattering on the tile. The forklift horn blared again. This time, it came from right behind her. She spun, eyes wide. The forklift loomed at the end of the aisle, headlights glaring, engine growling low. The man in the seat smiled wider, blood smeared across his apron. Maria screamed and ran. She darted through tools, across seasonal displays, past aisles of lumber that seemed endless. The forklift followed, somehow always behind her, no matter how sharp she turned or how fast she ran. Its shadow stretched across every wall, swallowing her own. Finally, she crashed through the restroom door, locking herself inside a stall. Her breath came ragged, hands pressed tight over her mouth. The lights flickered above, buzzing harder, and from the vent came the sound of his voice. Maria. Her name, repeated over and over, distorted into static. She clutched the stall door, praying, tears streaming silently. The handle rattled once, twice, then stopped. She waited. Minutes dragged into an eternity. When she finally dared to leave, the restroom was empty. The forklift was gone. But when she stepped back into the warehouse, the forklifts all sat in their bays, lined up in a perfect row. Every key was missing, every seat empty, yet faintly she could still hear it, beeping. Somewhere deeper in the store. Maria quit the next morning, turning in her badge without explanation. She never told her co-workers exactly what happened, but others began noticing strange things after she left. Forklifts idling in the dark, though no one had the keys. Pallets rearranged overnight. And sometimes, on security footage, a forklift gliding down an aisle by itself, an eyeless man in the seat smiling at the camera. When the morning crew arrived, everything looked normal. But the night workers whispered, "If you ever hear a forklift's reverse beep echoing after closing, don't look for it. Don't follow. Because once it finds you, it never stops." Home Depot's paint counter always seemed harmless enough. Customers came with swatches and dreams of remodeling, and the machine behind the counter dutifully mixed their chosen colors. But for Darren, a part-time associate who often worked late, the paint counter carried a reputation he couldn't ignore. Other employees whispered about it: strange spills, cans that didn't match formulas, accidents no one could explain. He had laughed it off at first. He needed the job and didn't believe in ghost stories. Darren was 21, taking community college classes by day and working retail by night. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid for gas, books, and the occasional fast food dinner. Still, the paint department unsettled him. Sometimes he'd find swatches smeared with colors that weren't in the system. Other times, he'd discover lids half opened, the contents bubbling as though freshly stirred even when no one had touched them. The veterans told him to ignore it. "Paint's just temperamental," one manager said with a shrug. But Darren couldn't shake the feeling that the machine wasn't just a machine. It was a Wednesday night when everything changed. The store was quiet, aisles half lit, the distant hum of HVAC filling the silence. His job was simple: wipe down the counter, cap the leftover cans, lock the cabinet. He rolled his shoulders, humming to himself, when a customer appeared out of nowhere. The man was tall, thin, his face gaunt and hollow-eyed. He carried no swatch, no paint chip, just an old photograph. The image was faded, edges curled, but the man laid it on the counter with deliberate care. "Match this," he whispered. Darren frowned. The photo showed nothing more than a wall, a pale gray wall, cracked and peeling. He hesitated. Normally, the scanner needed clean colors, not faded scraps. But the man's stare was so intense, Darren didn't argue. He slid the photo under the scanner. The machine whirred, its screen flickering. Formulas appeared, then vanished, replaced with symbols Darren didn't recognize. Finally, a number settled on the display. Darren swallowed hard, loaded pigments according to the instructions, and slid the can into the mixer. The machine rattled violently, more than usual. It shook the entire counter, bolts squealing against the floor. Darren cursed under his breath and reached to shut it off, but before he touched the button, the mixer went still. The silence afterward was worse than the noise. The man leaned closer, his breath cold against Darren's ear. "Well?" "Open it." Darren's hands trembled as he pried off the lid. Inside, instead of smooth paint, a thick black liquid churned, bubbling like tar. The stench hit him instantly: rot, sulfur, something sharp that made his eyes water. He gagged, pushing the can back. "This isn't paint." The man smiled thinly. "Perfect." The liquid rippled. A blister swelled on its surface, bursting with a wet pop. Black ooze sprayed across Darren's shirt and arms, burning his skin. He screamed, clawing at his sleeves, but the substance clung, blistering wherever it touched. The man didn't react. He picked up the photograph, tucked it into his coat, and walked away. The automatic doors opened for him without a sound. Darren cried out for help, but the man vanished into the night. The can overflowed. Black sludge poured across the counter, crawling like a living thing. Darren backed away, knocking over rows of swatches. They fluttered to the ground and dissolved instantly in the spreading ooze, colors bleeding into black stains. He grabbed the emergency phone on the wall. No signal, just static. The intercom above him crackled to life. A voice whispered his name. "Darren." He dropped the phone, heart hammering. The liquid slithered off the counter, tendrils stretching toward him across the tile. He bolted. He ran down the aisles, weaving past brushes and rollers. But the ooze followed, splitting into streams that spread along the floor, cutting off escape routes. The store warped around him. Shelves elongated, aisles stretched longer than they should, walls fading into endless gray. Everywhere, color drained from the store. The orange Home Depot signs, the bright displays, all dulled into the same pale shade as the wall in the photo. Darren stumbled, sprawling across the floor. The liquid caught up, climbing his boots, searing through the fabric. He kicked wildly, tearing free, but more poured from the ceiling vents, dripping steadily onto his shoulders. He screamed as it burned through his skin. Through the haze, he saw the figures watching him. Dozens of them lined along the aisles. They looked like customers, but wrong. Faces blurred, hands clutching photographs. Their mouths moved in unison. "Mix it! Mix it! Mix it!" Darren staggered to his feet, grabbing a stir stick from a display. He swung desperately at the ooze. The stick sliced through, but the liquid corroded it instantly, turning it into flakes of rust. The sludge surged forward, wrapping around his arms, dragging him back toward the paint counter. The mixer rattled violently again, its screen glowing blood red. Symbols scrolled faster than his eyes could follow. The can boiled over, sludge spilling in rivers across the tile. The figures stepped closer, chanting louder. Perfect. 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 The liquid climbed his chest, engulfing him. It forced its way into his nose, his mouth, choking him. He thrashed, clawing at it, but the ooze burned through his throat, silencing his screams. The last thing he saw was the mixer flashing a single word: accepted. When the morning crew arrived, the paint counter was spotless. The mixer gleamed, the swatches were orderly, the floor dry. But Darren never clocked out. His apron was missing. His keys were gone. The only trace was a faint smell of sulfur lingering in the air. Employees whispered about him afterward. They said sometimes, when the machine acted up late at night, it produced more than paint. A thick black sludge, bubbling and foul. And if you opened it, you'd hear voices chanting inside, begging for more. Customers reported odd cans, too. Buckets filled with colors no one had requested, lids sealed so tight they couldn't be opened. Some swore they heard faint tapping from inside, like fingernails on metal. Management brushed it off as rumors, but night workers avoided the counter whenever possible. The story spread beyond the store. Resellers joked about cursed paint that ruined walls overnight. DIY forums whispered about cans that bled through layers of primer. And employees swore that if the paint counter ever reeked of sulfur, you should leave immediately. Because if you didn't, you'd end up like Darren. Swallowed by the mix, your name whispered forever through the intercom. Home Depot's lighting section was one of the brightest places in the store. Rows of chandeliers, lamps, and bulbs stretched down a long aisle, each fixture glowing softly. For most customers, it was just another department. But for Thomas, a father shopping with his young daughter, it became something far stranger. It was a Saturday evening, the store buzzing with weekend shoppers. Thomas held his daughter Lily's hand as they wandered through the aisles, searching for a new ceiling fan. At 7 years old, Lily was curious about everything, tugging at his arm to look at every glittering lamp and shimmering bulb. Her laughter echoed as she darted ahead, pointing out fixtures shaped like stars, ones that sparkled like diamonds. Thomas smiled despite himself. Trips like this were rare. Work and bills often kept him too busy. This was supposed to be a simple, happy errand. When they reached the lighting section, Lily's eyes lit up. "Daddy, look," she exclaimed, running to a row of desk lamps. Thomas chuckled. "Stay right there, okay? I'll grab the fan box." He walked a few steps further, scanning the shelves. It should have taken less than a minute. But when he turned back, Lily was gone. His chest tightened. "Lily?" he called, trying to sound calm. No answer. He pushed the cart forward, scanning both sides. The aisle looked longer than before, stretching into the distance far beyond where it should have ended. The fixtures glowed brighter, buzzing faintly, their light harsh against his eyes. "Lily?" His voice cracked now. He quickened his pace, footsteps echoing. Every few steps he glimpsed her. A flash of her ponytail, the scuff of her sneakers disappearing around the corner. But when he reached the spot, the aisle only stretched further, endless rows of lights humming above him. Sweat formed on his brow. He walked faster, then broke into a jog, his heart hammering. The shelves blurred as he passed, lamps swaying slightly as if stirred by wind, but there was no wind, only heat. The further he went, the warmer the air grew, suffocating, like standing under a dozen suns. He stopped, gasping. He looked back. The way he'd come was gone. No end cap, no other shoppers, just more aisle, more lights buzzing endlessly behind him. Thomas's knees weakened. "This isn't real," he muttered. But the lights above flickered, humming louder, almost like laughter. "Daddy!" A small voice echoed ahead. Relief surged through him. "Lily!" He bolted forward, weaving through rows of glowing fixtures. The aisle stretched, warped, but he didn't stop. The lights grew harsher, searing white, burning spots into his vision. He shielded his eyes, stumbling but pressed on. At last, he saw her. Lily, standing in the middle of the aisle, her back turned. Her small frame looked so fragile in the endless glow. Thomas sprinted, lungs burning, but when he reached her, she was gone. Only her sneakers remained, neatly placed side by side on the tile. No. His throat closed. He dropped to his knees, clutching the shoes, his vision blurred with tears. The aisle hummed louder, mocking. The lights flickered. For an instant, everything went dark. The silence was suffocating. Then the fixtures flared back on, blindingly bright. The aisle had changed. The lamps weren't lamps anymore. They were twisted shapes of metal, glowing like molten bone. The shelves writhed like ribs, narrowing into a tunnel of light. And at the far end, something waited. A figure. Tall, thin, its body flickering like fire's shadow. Its face glowed featureless, but its mouth stretched wide, filled with white light. It raised a hand, beckoning. Thomas stumbled back, clutching Lily's shoes. The lights overhead burst one by one, showering sparks. The tunnel shook, narrowing further. The figure stepped closer, its mouth splitting wider. From it came a chorus of voices, men, women, children, all crying in unison. Thomas turned and ran. He sprinted through the tunnel, ignoring the searing heat, the sweat pouring down his face. But no matter how fast he ran, the aisle never ended. The shelves stretched infinitely, light exploding above him. The voices followed, whispering his name. Thomas, Thomas. His legs gave out. He fell hard, the sneakers skidding across the floor. He crawled, sobbing, reaching for them, but the light consumed them, burning them to ash. The figure loomed over him, lowering its glowing hand. The searing white filled his vision, burning into his eyes. Morning came. Employees found an empty cart in the lighting section. Inside it sat a single box of ceiling fans and a pair of child's sneakers, neatly placed side by side. Thomas and Lily never checked out. Their car still sat in the lot. Security footage showed them entering the aisle together. Then, static. When the video cleared, only the cart remained. Shoppers whispered afterward. Some swore the lighting aisle stretched longer than it should. Others said they heard voices calling their names from deep within. A few claimed bulbs flickered in strange rhythms, pulsing like heartbeats. Employees refused to close alone. Because if you lingered too long under the buzzing lights, the aisle grew longer. And once it took you, it never gave you back. Home Depot's tool rental center was usually one of the busiest spots in the store. Contractors came and went with saws, nail guns, and carpet cleaners. Most employees hated working the return counter because the tools always came back dirty or broken. But every so often, a tool came back with a stranger problem, one that no one could explain. Eddie, a college student working part-time, didn't mind the rental desk. Compared to hauling lumber or unloading pallets, this was easy money. He scanned barcodes, wiped tools down, handed out receipts. At 20, juggling night shifts and morning classes, the routine gave him a strange sense of stability. But he'd heard the stories. Old-timers whispered about tools that came back wrong. A drill that never powered off even when unplugged. A chainsaw that smelled like rot no matter how much it was cleaned. And the jackhammer. Always the jackhammer. "Don't run it after dark," one associate told him once. "It digs deeper than it should." Eddie laughed, chalking it up to retail horror stories told to scare newbies, until the night it arrived. It was a Friday evening, the store winding down from its rush. Eddie was yawning behind the counter when a man shuffled in, dragging a jackhammer on a dolly. The man looked exhausted, clothes smeared with dirt, eyes hollow. He didn't say a word as he slid the rental paperwork across the counter. Eddie scanned the barcode, wincing at the strange metallic smell rising from the machine. Not grease, not oil. Something sharper. Almost like blood. "Rough job?" he asked, trying to lighten the mood. The man stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away. No receipt, no small talk. When Eddie glanced back down, the paperwork was gone. Only the jackhammer remained. Uneasy, Eddie wheeled it into the back room for cleaning. He meant to give it a quick wipe down, but curiosity got the better of him. He plugged it in to make sure it worked. The machine roared to life. The floor trembled, the shelves rattling. Eddie flipped the switch off. Nothing. He yanked the plug from the outlet. Still, it hammered, its steel bit slamming into the concrete with bone-rattling force. Cracks spiderwebbed across the floor. From the fissures seeped a dark sludge, thick and slow. Eddie stumbled back, horrified as the cracks widened. Shapes moved beneath the surface, writhing, whispering. The jackhammer screamed louder, vibrating so hard sparks shot from its casing. The concrete split wide, revealing a pit below. From its depths rose a sound that made Eddie's stomach clench. Voices, hundreds of them, chanting together, "Dig! Dig! Dig!" He ran for the door, but it slammed shut. The walls groaned, cracks racing upward. Dust fell from the ceiling. The jackhammer stood upright on its own, pounding the ground in rhythm with the chant. The sludge stretched across the floor, tendrils curling toward Eddie's shoes. He kicked free, heart racing, grabbing a broom for defense. He swung wildly, but the wood splintered instantly, sucked into the fissures. The pit widened, and from the dark something clawed upward. Hands, pale, skeletal, slick with sludge. They gripped the concrete, pulling themselves into the light. Dozens of them, then hundreds, not whole bodies, just fragments. Arms, torsos, heads with hollow eyes, each whispered through broken mouths, "Return! Return! Return!" Eddie scrambled onto the counter, clutching a box cutter. The fragments crawled toward him, leaving black streaks. He slashed desperately, cutting through arms that dissolved into mist, but more surged forward. They clambered over one another, forming a wave of limbs and faces. The chanting rose, shaking his bones. The jackhammer's steel bit pounded faster, widening the pit until it swallowed half the room. The fragments swarmed up the counter, clawing at his jeans, yanking at his arms. The box cutter slipped from his hand. He screamed, kicking, but they dragged him down. The last thing he saw was the jackhammer, standing like a sentinel, hammering into the pit. The chanting roared in his ears as the darkness closed over him. Morning came, and the rental desk looked normal. The jackhammer sat neatly on its rack, spotless. But Eddie never clocked out. His apron still hung in the locker room. His car still sat in the lot. He was simply gone. The manager reported him as a no-call, no-show. But the night shift whispered otherwise. They said the jackhammer rattled against its rack when no one was near, that its steel bit dripped faint sludge even after being scrubbed clean. And sometimes when the store was quietest, they heard it pounding faintly, always in threes, always deeper than the concrete should allow. One worker swore he saw Eddie's reflection in the counterglass, his face pale, lips moving soundlessly. Another claimed the security footage showed the jackhammer moving on its own, inching closer to the pit in the back room. Corporate dismissed the rumors, but employees avoided the tool whenever they could. Still, customers rented it. Contractors carried it away, using it for basements or foundations. Most brought it back without issue, but every so often one didn't return. Their paperwork vanished, their names wiped from the system. And the jackhammer always found its way back, sitting on the rack as though it had never left. If you ever rent it, employees give a hushed warning. Don't use it after dark. Don't let it run for too long. Because once it starts digging, it doesn't just break concrete, it digs deeper, into the ground, into the dark. And eventually it digs into you. Home Depot always felt different after hours. When the last customer left and the doors locked, the store changed. The air grew heavy, the lights dimmed, and the silence was suffocating. For Carla, the night manager, closing shifts were routine. But one Friday, she learned just how dangerous the silence could be. Carla had worked at the store for 6 years. She knew every aisle, every shortcut, every creak of the floors. She was efficient, respected, unshaken by the occasional late-night noise. Or so she thought. That night, she stayed later than usual, finishing reports in the office. Her team had already left, the building empty except for her. At 11:45, she grabbed her keys and began her final walkthrough. She checked the registers, locked the cages, verified the alarms. By midnight, she was halfway down the main aisle when the intercom crackled to life. A voice whispered through the static. "Carla." She froze, heart skipping. The intercom system shouldn't have been on. She reached for her walkie-talkie, then remembered everyone else had clocked out. She was alone, completely alone. "Carla," the voice repeated, longer this time. Low, distorted, like a breath against her ear. Her pulse quickened. "Who's in here?" she demanded. The store swallowed her words. No answer. Only the faint buzz of lights above. She tried to shake it off. Maybe interference, maybe a glitch. She forced herself to continue, checking locks, scanning aisles. But the voice followed, crackling through the speakers. "Carla, come to hardware." Her blood ran cold. She should have left. Called security. Locked the doors. But something compelled her forward. Her feet moved down the endless aisles, the fluorescent lights flickering with each step. She reached the hardware section. Empty shelves stretched before her, drills and saws locked neatly in cases. Nothing out of place. Then she heard it. A hammering sound. Steady. Sharp. Like nails driven into wood. It echoed from the next aisle. Carla turned the corner and froze. A man stood at the far end, hunched over a workbench display. He wore an orange apron, but his back was twisted, shoulders too wide, head cocked at an unnatural angle. His arm rose and fell mechanically, hammering invisible nails into the wood. Each strike sent a tremor through the floor. The sound echoed deep into her chest. "Excuse me," Carla called, her voice shaking. The man stilled. Slowly, he turned. His face was pale, cracked like old plaster. His eyes were black hollows, his mouth a jagged line stretching too wide. The hammer in his hand dripped dark liquid, splattering across the tile. And when he spoke, his voice came not from his mouth, but from the intercom above. "Carla, you forgot to lock up." She stumbled back, fumbling with her keys. The hammer clanged as he dropped it, the sound echoing like thunder. Then the lights above flickered out, one by one, plunging the aisle into darkness. Carla bolted. She sprinted down the aisle, shoes pounding against the tile. Behind her, footsteps followed, heavy, deliberate, keeping perfect pace. The intercom screamed her name in distorted bursts. "Carla! Carla! Carla!" She cut through lumber, weaving between towering stacks of wood. The footsteps grew louder, closer. She grabbed a fallen 2x4, swinging wildly into the shadows. But nothing was there, only the echo of her own panic. She darted into the break room, slamming the door shut, jamming a chair under the handle. Her chest heaved as she pressed her back to the wall. The silence returned, heavier than before. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. Then the intercom above her head crackled again. This time, the voice wasn't distorted. It was her own. "Carla, you're not leaving." Her eyes shot open. The break room door creaked. The chair slid slowly across the floor, dragged by invisible force. The handle twisted. She scrambled for the emergency exit, shoving it open into the night air. The alarm should have blared. But the parking lot was silent, too silent. Her car sat alone under the lamps. She sprinted, keys shaking in her hand, diving into the driver's seat. She locked the doors, fumbled with the ignition. The engine roared to life. Relief washed over her, until she looked in the rearview mirror. The man in the apron sat in the back seat, his cracked face grinning, eyes hollow. The hammer rested in his lap, dripping dark liquid onto the upholstery. And the intercom screamed one final word: "Stay." The next morning, employees found Carla's car still in the lot. The doors were locked. Her keys and phone sat neatly on the dashboard. But the seatbelts were buckled tight, as if holding someone down. And the fabric in the back seat was stained with something dark that no cleaning could remove. No one took closing shifts alone after that, because sometimes when the intercom crackles after midnight, it doesn't call out a random name, it calls yours.